Hi there, I'm Danny Flex and welcome to Seconds Out Live. Delighted to be joined, as always, by Mr. Ayman Khan. Ayman, how are you?
Do not adjust your sets yet. I'm adjusting my set right now. I'm great, Danny. All the better for speaking to yourself and joining everyone on Seconds Out Live. Can't wait for this edition's real fumble and fub here from me. Can you believe it? Terrible.
You said to not adjust your set, but are my eyes deceiving me? Have you got something of a short back and sides going on?
I gotta adjust my hair. I gotta adjust my speech. Everything's gotta be adjusted right now. But not the fans, not the viewers, not the listeners. Can't wait for their contributions.
Ayman and I are both recovering from the devastating news around 5 minutes ago, or at least I found out that KSI Wayne Bridge is off already. Gutted. Made my Bridge Too Far headline even more applicable. Which is perhaps the good part of it, or maybe several good parts, depending on your perspective on Misfits boxing as a whole. But we're not starting talking about that, and I'm not sure why there's a Joshua headline up on the screen that I'm looking at the moment. Modfather Vinny, maybe you want to address that. I know we said we might switch a couple of the headlines later on in the order, but there's not Joshua's not well, he's not done yet, and we are going to be talking about him, funnily enough, but that's not the headline for this week. We are going to be starting by talking about the fight that finally got over the line last week. I say finally, it's been over the line before. They just never actually got in the ring. And that's still the wrong headline. We'll get there. I think Vinny's going through last week's set rather than this week's. But yeah, Chris Eubank Jr., Conor Benn, from what we've been told, we've heard nothing really from Eubank Jr., but Conor Benn and Turki Al-Sheikh have all said pen has been put to paper. Boxer, who are Eubank's promoter, have endorsed it as well. So we've got no reason to disbelieve the news. They will be getting it on April in London, and I guess we're interested in how we got here, and there's a great video up on the channel at the moment. Josh Green put it together of the rivalry between the fathers, Nigel Benn and Chris Eubank Sr., and how we've got all the way from there to 30 years later, the sons dueling hopefully this time around in April. But we're also going to be talking about just what is the attraction of this fight, if indeed there is a widespread attraction remaining after the aborted contest 2.5 years ago. Before we get into the chat for the first time, Ayman, what was your kind of primary emotion when you found out the fight had finally been signed?
I guess it's like we're here. We're still not finally here because there's been no official announcement or anything like the final details haven't been released as of yet. But it seems we're at the juncture that we were supposed to be at a couple of years back, and it hasn't washed off for myself as to when it was first initially announced. I remember I did a podcast for the then outlet I was with, and I raised the concerns that there were concerns for both fighters, even though it was more about Eubank Jr. and the rehydration clause. There were still concerns about Benn and coming up to the weight and it being at a weight he'd never fought before. Now, Benn has had a couple of bouts in and around super welterweight, but still not at middleweight, and still not against a fighter who you would imagine would maximize every pound of the 170-pound hydration clause that's been levied against him, which he's agreed to as well. I should add that in there. And that is a concern. That is a risk that Conor Benn is accepting to get the fight over the line. And even though a lot of kind of the tide of favor might have turned away from Benn off of the back of the failed tests that he had, I still think that it still should be raised, that concern of a fighter that's given away that weight, because I wouldn't call them a fully fledged super welter nor a fully fledged middleweight, nor heading towards someone who's a catch weight of 170 on the night, you'd imagine. So definite concerns on that end. I don't have any concerns as to whether this will be promoted and sold well, because both fighters have been able to keep the interest going, although maybe hardcore boxing fans have been a little bit fed up of everything. Casual boxing fans will still have the interest, and the lapsed boxing fans who followed their father's careers will still follow the interest. Whether they're both involved is another thing. I'm not too sure if that's the case. Certainly, Eubank Jr. hasn't had his father at the hip in the last few fights, although I think Harlem Eubank had the attention of his uncle in his corner, helping him with his previous fights. But no, the fight will sell. The fight will sell well. I just, I don't know. I wonder how Eubank Jr. will approach this in that, and how the promoters will promote this, because before you were selling the fight off the back of their feud and their family feud. Now it's become a bit more personal from Eubank Jr.'s perspective, because for his perspective, he's called Ben and Eddie Hearn, rats for trying to get the fight over the line, I guess, the first time around off the back of those failed tests, as he puts it from his perspective. So does Eubank Jr. stay silent on that? Is Eubank Jr. going to sell the fight on the back of this person he feels might have tried to wrong him, and he's going to serve justice on fight night? Is he able to speak like that? Eubank Jr. is very much someone who won't hold his tongue, hasn't held his tongue, and it's got him into hot water. So do we see that feud being sold on that basis? And that's a bit of a weird territory for me. So I guess I anticipate that, and I look forward to seeing if that is the case. Eubank Jr. himself sells a fight in a way that, even though it's quite understated and different to his father, he's still very good. He's a very good foil to Conor Benn, and always seems to be able to get under his skin. So that sort of thing, I think, they very much got that side sorted. I just wonder how, I guess I know how hardcore boxing fans will take it, but casual boxing fans, I think, will really enjoy it. And wherever stadium it is, wherever it is, I think it will do very well.
I'm just going to go to the chat before I introduce this week's poll, and then I'll give my kind of take on the fight. Ben Eubank finally being over the line. Ramoni Mode XD says, guess who's back? I am. Didn't really give us much time to guess there, mate. Eridar Boxing TV says, hey, seconds out. I don't know if he meant it in that way, but I like the Sopranos. That's what I'm going with. David Warren says, pair of spoilt Nepo babies. But as I asked him just afterwards, he was talking about Eubank and Ben, not myself and Ayman. Thunder Road says, close to 50 watching before the start. I mean, there's actually over 70 now. And only 3 likes. If you aren't a bot, hit the thumbs up. We don't discriminate, Thunder Road. If you are a bot, hit the thumbs up. Show what AI can really do. Ramoni Mode XD says, Bridge pulled out as he was offended by KSI's comments about his ex-wife and John Terry. We will be talking about that in segment 3, when I'll be leaving Ayman for a bit and probably inviting Josh Hart on to talk about the Misfits realm, because it's definitely not really my scene. Thunder Road says, Ayman still rocking the man bun with a massive smiley emoji. So that's good. David Warren says, not a big fan of either of them, but I'm hoping Eubank humbles the drug cheat. We should point out that Conor Benn was cleared, quote unquote, by the WBC and has had his suspension lifted by a national anti-doping panel. So to call him a cheat may not fall within the realms of acceptability anymore. Blue Tech 97 says, Bridge just looks stupid in this whole situation. Quite embarrassed for him. He doesn't need to get involved in YouTube tear-ups. I'm sure he's been more embarrassed in the past. Thunder Road says to Ramoni Mode XD, is that really the reason? The whole segment was way too WWE, but unless it was written in the contracts, his past and personal life are fair game, in my opinion. Ronnie Mode XD says Wayne's released a statement on it. We'll be showing that statement a bit later on. Blue Tech 97 says, I doubt Seconds Out even knows who JT26 is, lol. Ouch. Who do you mean by Seconds Out? You referring to me specifically? Ayman? Who? We're all football fans here. Beautiful Golden Dragon, welcome back. He says, Grey Dad and Capote back at it. Spotty team Josh is locked out. Josh Hart will be joining us for segment 3, as pointed out. Thunder Road says, even Josh Hart wasn't born Hart knows who JT26 is. We'll check with him later, because he'll appropriately enough be joining us for that segment. Jay Sharp says, Eubank should get this over easy with the fried egg emoji. No idea what he could be referring to there. DB Coop 1, I'm so disappointed in Ayman. I told him to apply for the Ring Magazine YouTube vacancy months ago, and he got beaten to it by Lewis Black Eye Hart. Yeah, well, let's not go in too much to Lewis Hart jumping ship, although I think it was a sinking ship, perhaps, that he deserted, you could say.
Speaking of black eyes, though, Danny, I got dropped with a body shot for the first time in my life today, and that was a new pain I discovered. Terrible. So
you got dropped or you got troubled?
I got dropped.
Ooh, who by?
Spencer McCracken Jr.
Oh, well, a proper boxer, yeah. I think that's fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been dropped by a body shot. I've been hurt by a body shot from a really good amateur before, but yeah, I haven't sparred many pros. Yeah, I mean, there's no disgrace there at all. In fact, Spencer McCracken Jr., you want to watch out, son. I'll be coming for you. Just kidding. I really won't. Thunder Road says, no DB Coupon for consecutive weeks in chat. I mean, he's one chat above you, Thunder Road. Has he jumped out of another plane? Well, let's hope not. Ramoni Mode XD's told him. He's just replied before you, so they've all sorted that out. Ramoni Mode XD says, the Ring Twitter said Okoli is fighting Luis Ortiz. What are your guys' reactions? It's not definitely fighting him. They're in talks, is what the tweet said. And yeah, we'll see if it actually happens. Good fight, I think, for Okoli. Maybe not for the fans necessarily. I'm not sure how well those styles will mesh. Oh, Lewis Hart's joined us. We're blessed by a denizen of the Ring magazine in the chat today, folks. Lewis Hart, here we are. We are here. Lewis Hart, the only question I've got for you is, are you running the Ring magazine social account now? Are you the new Michael Benson? Because if so, you need to start putting our links in, mate, or we're going to fall out. Thunder Road is... Oh, no, he's still talking just to DB Cooper 1. So let's get the poll up nice and early. Mod Father Vinny, if you can. We're asking you, what will be your reason for watching Chris Eubank Jr. against Conor Benn? Is it A, because of their dads? And I'll be talking about them in a minute. A lot of our audience might be too young to have watched Nigel Benn and Chris Eubank Sr. in their primes. Is it because of their beef and the controversy that has reigned in the last 2.5 to 3 years? Is it because of the fight itself? Do you think it's a really good fight? Or is it the fact that you won't be watching the fight at all? Let us know what you think, and we'll read out the results of the poll at the end of the show. Ramoni Mode XD says Ortiz is just reaching his prime. Sam Jones did a very similar joke on Twitter, which is very funny. Lewis Hart says, keep crying, flex and lol. I'll take that as a yes, Lewis, that you are now the Twitter monkey for Ring Magazine. So we'll keep an eye on you going forward. Big Chungus, nice to see you. Much love, chaps. Where's Little Josh? Little Josh will be on. If he's Little Josh, is Josh Green Big Josh? Because he's not that big. Interesting. But yeah, Little Josh Hart will be joining us about 10 to 5. Halusi Ozdemir says, I reckon Tommy Fury is happy he didn't fight Darren Till after his performance in the weekend. Yeah, maybe. Probably missed out on a decent payday, though. DB Coupon's congratulating Lewis Hart on his new gig. What an honour to be on the receiving end of a turkey payday. Raw or cooked? That's all I want to know. But yeah, moving on. Nigel Benn was around and plying his trade during my youth. The first fight I ever saw live, or the first show I ever saw live, was headlined by Benn against McClellan at the, I think it was the Den or the London Arena. I always get them mixed up. It was in 1995. And obviously tragic circumstances surrounding the finish of that fight and McClellan's life since. But the fight itself was absolutely incredible. Ridiculously, febrile atmosphere. And just a great back and forth action. Benn getting off the deck, and it was actually knocked out the ring in the first round and getting up to beat McClellan at the end. So I was around during that period. Obviously, the two Benn Eubank fights were earlier than that. I think it was 1990, the first one, where Eubank Sr. stopped Benn at middleweight, and then the draw, controversial draw. I think most observers thought Benn did enough to get revenge. That was a real dud of a fight as well. 93 in Manchester, I think that was, up at super middle. Benn had kind of reignited his career out in the US. Came back, and yeah, most people felt he did enough to get the decision against his old rival. And even as recently as, 5-6 years ago, there was still talk of a potential third fight. Both men in their 40s or 50s talking about going to war once again. There's that famous clip of them on that, what was it, gladiator-style reality show where they were arguing with each other. They're never going to see eye to eye. And Ayman mentioned there, how involved will they be in this fight between their sons? I'm not sure. I think Nigel Benn is heavily involved in his son's life and perhaps his career as well. I think he could be easily convinced. He's still got strong ties to Matchroom, Eddie Hearn, Tony Sims. So I think they could get him involved without too much trouble. On the Eubank Sr. side, I know he's got a great relationship with Matchroom's former head of boxing, John Wischusen, who's now got a key role at Boxer. So maybe that could be arranged. But from the most recent we heard, the pair, son and father, were estranged, not just strange. Something Eubank Sr. has been contending with for a long time. But yeah, so they may come back together. I think there was an interview recently with Junior where he said he'd like to have his dad involved in this fight. It makes sense commercially for all involved. It kind of would feel right. But I'm not sure, and this is why the poll question is worded as it is, how much of the interest, the clamour for this fight is related to the rivalry between the fathers. Because people of my age, sure, we know that Eubank and Benn was like the biggest thing in the early 90s, particularly in Britain. But how many people who are the target market for this fight, who came up watching Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr., will they have any idea about what the dads achieved and how much they've benefited their sons in the early part of their own careers? I think it's quite difficult to say. Ayman, from your perspective, you're obviously, you've got a good 10 years or more on me. How aware were you, just as a casual basis, of Nigel Benn and Chris Eubank Sr.'s achievements and their relationships to their sons' careers?
Yeah, more so with Eubank Sr. because Eubank Sr. flitted over into the mainstream, become a bit of a pop culture figure in the UK, and had been on shows like I'm a Celebrity and other kind of appearances. He'd been on Louis Theroux documentaries as well, and I was very much a keen watcher of Louis Theroux's offerings on BBC iPlayer. So seeing that and then kind of learning a bit more about their career, and then the subsequent documentaries, being on like Piers Morgan shows, that was more so my kind of understanding of Eubank Sr. as not really being in boxing or born when he was in his pomp. So my dad would always talk about Eubank Sr. and just how eccentric he was, and some of the things that he would see him get up to in his career and on TV. And then the similar sort of thing with, when you talk about Eubank Sr., you can't not talk about Nigel Benn. So it's sort of like the osmosis of learning about Nigel Benn through there. And then when Eubank started his career on Channel 5, Eubank Jr. started his career, Eubank Sr. was heavily involved, and he was still kind of doing all the poses and the talk about his son and promoting him to the rafters. And then Eubank Sr. and Jr. came to a bit more prominence in my mind because I absolutely loved the career of Gennady Golovkin, brilliant fighter, breakthrough fighter for a Kazakh fighter to garner so much interest in the US is absolutely unheard of, and to sell out arenas and have those big fights and be sponsored by huge sponsors like Hublot, just wonderful fighter. And there was always this talk about whether Eubank Jr. would end up in the ring with Golovkin, and then the famous line of Eubank Jr. eventually losing his pen, and Kell Brook unfortunately had to save the day and suffered an eye injury and then a subsequent eye injury, and who knows what would happen to Kell Brook had those not maybe had a factor in his career. But Eubank then, following his career and seeing if he can capture world titles, see if he can capture what his dad laid out for him, was an interesting thread to keep a follow of. And like I mentioned before, he was able to sell fights through his own different demeanor, and then seeing him break out of his father's shadow, he's done very, very well to do that, because his father casts a big, entertaining shadow. And he's branched over into poker and other such means, Gogglebox, whatever. Like he's really done well. I mean, when in the thinking of sons of famous fighters, Chavez Jr. has one that's done well, even though he's more of a figure that's to be laughed at right now by some. I think you got to give his credit, and Eubank Jr. as well. I think you got to give his credit. It's just a shame that with Eubank Jr.'s talent, he hasn't won a fully fledged world title. With Conor Benn, because Eubank Jr., of course, and then the fallout with his father and kind of keeping track of that too. It's always kind of, Eubank's been able to keep himself in the limelight, I guess, in some form, Eubank Jr. and Sr. Conor Benn, I remember one of the press conferences, it was one where Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn were both on, and there was some sort of back and forth between Benn and Eubank Sr., and Benn was pissed off. I think it was a video on IFL, I can't remember, and Benn was like, English. Why is he even calling him English? I don't know if you can still hear me, Danny, as I've just frozen here. I'm back now. But yeah, Ben and Ben Sr. Ben Sr. has always seemed to be a part of Ben's career, but from a little bit further off, because he's over in, is it Australia? So whether it's been via FaceTime or sometimes there on fight night, Ben Sr. has been there. I think Ben Jr. has had a tougher time to find his own footing within the sport, because Ben Sr. has been a little bit out of the limelight and not in the UK. I think it would have been different had it been in the UK. So Ben, as well as followed his career, always the notion of sons of famous fighters is always an interesting one for me. Obviously, the Payno fights and how they panned out. Then the idea of him he got an injury, took some time out to really kind of hone his craft with Tony Sims. And during the lockdown period, when he come back against Formella, and he looked brilliant. He looked faster, he looked stronger, entertaining, got a little bit of confidence about him that his father had as well too. And I remember being on those Zoom interviews, and this is when I was trying to forge my career within the sport. And all of us that were kind of YouTube reporters, I guess, we were all gassing Conor Benn up and saying, wow, you've done really well here. You've really kind of taken that time to really improve yourself and look at where you're at and what you want to do. And Ben was in his car. He might have pulled up to a petrol station. He was like, look, you guys are gassing me up, but I've got to keep my feet on the ground. And yeah, it's great to hear this. And he was just saying all the right things. And then, of course, further down the line, after a string of knockouts against sure opponents that weren't in their prime, the failed test had occurred, and that's kept Ben in the limelight as well. But I've kind of kept somewhat of a loose eye on their careers, and ever since then, they've both grown into more prominence within the boxing world and to mainstream world to a degree. Did I think it would culminate in a fight? No. Calla was one of the first people to put the threads out in a little Twitter graphic. I won't forget that. There was Calla probably sowed the major step towards this fight. But the truth is, they both command eyes, spotlight, and money, and it's a big fight in the UK. So I guess it had to be done.
Fair enough. Going back to the chat, Ramoni Mode XD says Gad said that he's heard both Eubank Sr. and Nigel will be heavily involved in the build-up. DB Cooper 1 says the only man I care for in the build-up is Eubank Sr. Man, myth, legend, Rastafari, big up yourself, Rasta, you done know. I'm not going to do the voice, DB Cooper 1, because I'll be straying dangerously close to cultural appropriation. And, you know, I'll watch Bo Selector. I can do the impression as good as anyone, but still. Zambanu Love says, do older fans hold more of a grudge for failed tests? Seems you get fans have forgot about Ben's failed test and jumped on the hype train again. Will fans of the dads do the same? We'll talk about that whole aspect of the fight in a minute. Just for people that have just tuned in or missed when we were talking about it, we've got a poll. We're asking what your reasons are for watching Eubank Jr. versus Benn. If indeed you're going to watch it, there's an option to not watch it at all, both in reality and in the poll. But is it because of their dads? Is it because of their beef? Is it just a really good fight, or will you not be watching at all? Please vote, and we'll read out the results at the end of the show. Blue Tech 97 is having a pop at Ayman's glasses, and Big Chungus swiftly comes to Ayman's defense. No surprise there. Jordan Elkez says, hi, do you think Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn will have a rematch regardless of the outcome in their fight? I mean, I hope there's no rematch clause, given how long this took to negotiate and get over the line. And, you know, the fight being scuppered with 2 days' notice a couple of years ago as well. I would hope it's a one and done type of affair. And if it proves incredibly competitive and exciting, commercially successful, then discuss a rematch. But yeah, I mean, all the big fights recently have had rematch clauses, so it wouldn't surprise me. Thunder Road says, speaking of Danny's youth, seems so long ago, mate. Whenever I watch This Is England, I always pictured that is what it was like for Danny growing up on an estate during Thatcher austerity England and political hooliganism. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a million miles away, to be fair, although it was in London rather than Birmingham. Is This Is England Birmingham? Somewhere in the Midlands. And do you mean This Is England the film, or do you mean the TV series? Both excellent. It's just good to know. Jack Dutton on the 45 says, will it be at the O2? I think it was rumoured it was going to be at Spurs Stadium, but we shall see. Yeah, that's Thunder Road has mentioned that rumour also. Eamon's reply to the glasses, the hotly debated glasses saga says, prefer circle over square. There you go. I mean, is that in everything, Eamon, or just glasses shapes?
Chocolates. I do quite like, you know, the little money chocolates that you get, and they're circle shapes. Although, like your Galaxy bars, the coins, they'll be squares. But I put on a second pair for you. These are also circle. I prefer these over the other ones as well too. It's only circle for me.
He's a glasses model. Who knew?
Yeah. Who wants to wear squares when you get called to square wearing glasses?
Zambanu Love says, better question is who will pay for it. Well, we've asked people's reasons for watching. Presumably, most people in the chat will pay for it if they're going to watch. I mean, I'm sure no one in the Seconds Out live chat would dare resort to nefarious means to avoid paying for this fight. Thunder Road says, Senior has a relatively new YouTube channel, Call Chris Eubank, where he answers select questions from a WhatsApp number. Interesting. Halusi Ozdemir says, very important question to the gentleman. I think he means us, Eamon. Could you please tell me why Benavidez isn't a mandatory for Canelo's belts? We will get onto that later if we have time, Halusi, but we have got a schedule to try and stick to. A bit like WWE on Netflix. There's no actual schedule. They can go on for as long as they want, but they still try and tell people they've gone over time, apparently. Jack Dutton says Benavidez was mandatory for the WBC. There you go. The chat will deal with this for us. We don't have to. Thunder Road clarifies, this is England, the film. I only watched after Prince Patel said Fraser Clark looked like Milky. I mean, in the fact that they're both mixed race gentlemen, but apart from that, I don't see any real... no, I don't think they look alike at all, to be honest. I'm not sure Fraser Clark's got the acting chops either. But yeah, this is England, the film. Very good. I thought the series was even better, to be honest. So if you can seek that out, it's probably worth watching. Give you an insight into young Flexen. Hakan's ringside live. Hakan Johansson, good to see you. I won't be going to Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn, but we'll probably pay for the PPV. Hakan, where do you reside? Is it Sweden, Norway? Let us know. And how much do you pay for the PPVs over there? Ramoni Mode XD's having a laugh at Hakan. He says, you pay for PPV and Ben versus Eubank at that. Put your money where your mouth is, or the opposite, Ramoni Mode XD. Let's see what you end up doing when the time comes in April. Yeah, so there is a kind of bit of a cloud hanging over the fight in terms of the saga revolving around Conor Benn's failed tests for clomiphene 2.5 years ago now. And Josh Hart interviewed Andy Clark last week, and he said, and it's gone up on the channel today, and he said that a lot of fans will feel they've got the right to know why Conor Benn was cleared, why his suspension was lifted by the National Anti-Doping Panel, because we know it has been lifted. And Ben says he's been cleared of any wrongdoing, but we haven't had a statement from the National Anti-Doping Panel about the reasons for the clearance, what was different this time around to previously when the suspension was imposed. Andy Clark also said, though, that he thinks the majority of people who want to watch this fight, pay for tickets, pay for the pay-per-view, won't really be that interested. They'll just want to see the fight. They're not really hardcore boxing fans. You know, this is being aimed predominantly at the casual audience who probably aren't as bothered about the failed test at all. Eamon, what do you think? Are you happy to accept now that the whole Conor Benn thing is in the past, draw a line under it, he's a clean athlete, or would you still like to see more detail, more clarity around the situation?
No, absolutely. You want to see more detail and clarity as to why the clomiphene was in his system. And I think it's on two parts, because if you look at it from a fan perspective, I imagine if you care about boxing and you want to sell a ticket or you want to buy a ticket for a fight, you'd want to know why. At least I would want to know why that was the case. Otherwise, I'm not purchasing a ticket personally. But as a reporter as well, too, I guess we have a duty to kind of ask those questions. And if we can find out that information, great, whether it's forthcoming or not. But I think for a fighter, when it comes to having this cloud around them, the best you can do is to be as transparent as possible with these situations. And I think that helps to build trust and confidence in any fighter that has this sort of situation, that it won't occur again. If you're clean, if you're adamant that you're clean, then put it out there. Give us those reasonings. Give us, especially when you're vehemently like we're denying the WBC's offering as to why it might have been in your system. You said no, that wasn't the case. Then it seemed like from that point of view that you were kind of willing to give your side of things. And I get that it's been emotional stress for Ben. I don't doubt that it would have been for him. I get it would be a difficult time for him, and he might have had those dark moments in his career. And I don't think that should be overshadowed or overlooked at all. Can't be easy dealing with those sorts of situations. But when you've come out the back of it and you're going to get back into the ring here and you want people to buy your ticket and get behind you again and support you again, then I think maybe it would be well stood to offer them the reasons as to why that was in your system. Ben might want to draw the line under it and feel that, look, if I tell you anything, it's not going to be enough. And I think, to be honest with you, that is a bit of an easy way out. I think
it's not just what he says. I think it's the fact that it's him saying it.
Yeah.
And there's only so much he can do about that. But I think there's an element of we don't want him to be the source because he's not independent. He can't be independent on this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not a knock on him. You can't be unbiased about a situation in which you're the main focus.
Mm-hmm.
To get a statement that gives some details, some facts from the NADP, or from UCAD or from the board, any of those bodies, that would be great. You know, because then you can say, yeah, they've still got skin in the game, but not to the extent that Benn has. And they can explain why they've lifted the suspension. The board can explain why, as Robert Smith said on TalkSport recently, he doesn't anticipate any problems in Benn getting a new British license. Mm-hmm. So why is that the case? Let us know, because I think Ben's right if he says that, you know, whatever I say won't be enough. It's because it's him saying it. I think an independent or, you know, more independent voice on this would be appreciated. And I think it would do Benn the world of good as well. And I know last time there was a thing that UCAD had said they couldn't release anything because of confidentiality. They couldn't release the full report without Ben's permission. Now, I don't know if that permission would be granted or not, but you would hope that he would say to UCAD, yeah, release it. You know, I want the truth to be out there. And that's the best thing he can do now. It's not to keep talking about it, not to give interviews on it, but just to say to whoever, a relatively independent part of the argument, yeah, release all the details. I'm happy for you to do that.
It's also whether you want to win back over the hardcore boxing fans as well too, and look at minority in voice. And this fight won't be sold on hardcore boxing fans, but they hold grudges, they hold on to things. And for every Benn post I see, sure, it's Twitter, and like I said, it's a cross section of fans here, but Benn kind of gets ridiculed. He's mocked. He's all sorts of kind of things are thrown his sort of way, and you can put an end to that, and you can kind of win them back over if you want to. It's Benn's choice on this. I'd like to see him do it, but it's his hand to make that move.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one. And if what Andy Clark said is right, and the vast majority of people who will be paying for this fight, whether in attendance on the night or on pay-per-view at home, aren't really that bothered about that aspect of the build-up, then it's not a big deal. I mean, Eubank Jr. is going to mention it. He's already made hay of it in the final negotiations, talking about, you know, how they drained him down and then pulled out the fight, and he's called Benn a cheat and so on and so forth. But it's very hard to remove, certainly from my memory, that Eubank Jr. knew about the failed drug test before the fight and was still more than happy to go ahead with it. In fact, he was one of the main people behind the scenes apparently pushing for it to go ahead alongside the promoters, of course. So, you know, we should all be thankful it didn't go ahead and the, you know, more sensible voices prevailed. But I think the flip side of that is you can only criticize so much when you still wanted to go ahead with the fight. And you're now signing a contract to fight someone you've previously called a cheat, apparently safe in the knowledge that either it's not going to happen again, causing the whole thing to be scuppered and you to waste your time, or that, you know, he's going to quote unquote cheat and you'll be in danger in the ring. So a lot's been kind of blown out of proportion, I think, on that Eubank Jr. side as well. That's no excuse for whatever happened on the Benn side. But I think, you know, Eubank Jr. is clearly more than comfortable that he doesn't feel Conor Benn will have any sort of crucial advantage if whatever happens in camp. I think it's a difficult fight to call. I think that's probably the biggest thing in favour of it. I think even going up to 160, a lot of people say, well, you know, it's two weights up for Benn. He's not even fought for the British title at welterweight. It should be a walk in the park for Eubank Jr. But then on the flip side, people will point to how awful, haggard, emaciated Eubank Jr. looked on the scales at 159 and say, well, 160 is only a pound more. When was the last time he looked good at 160? It's a difficult one, you know, because we're talking about a lot of aspects outside the ring. There's the inactivity of both of them, if we're honest. There's the difficulty in assessing form because neither of them have fought at the very top world level. Oh, well, I suppose Eubank Jr. has back in the day and fallen short against George Groves. But for the most part, they haven't fought at top world level. So how do you assess the fight? So we'll go to the chat, but then, Ayman, it might be prediction time or early prediction time. I know you love doing an early prediction. You don't like to wait for fight week or the build-up there. Where are we? So Hakan's Ringside Live says, I'm from Sweden and pay-per-view is 215 SEK, around £16, due to the weak Swedish krona exchange rate. Okay, interesting. Pretty good value, I would suggest, for a lot of the pay-per-views we get over here. Thunder DB Cooper 1 asked Thunder Road if he's seen Snatch, to which Thunder Road replied that he has not. and not sure he's even heard of it. Never heard of Snatch, Thunder Road. Interesting. DB Cooper 1 says, you've got to watch it. You'll finally get why we call Frank Warren Bricktop. Never mind, this is England. Watch Snatch. And then Thunder Road says, cheers, I'll find it. I was wondering where Bricktop came from. Fish Eyes is obvious. Harsh, but self-explanatory. But I was at a loss for Bricktop. Well, you won't be for much longer, mate. Zambanu Love says, if sanctioning bodies, promoters, boards, pundits, broadcasters, and other fighters don't care, can see why most fans don't either. Well, you've got to think that in the build-up to the fight, the people who've got a financial interest, like promoters, broadcasters, and so on, they're not going to mention it. You know, even if it helps kind of build this feud, this beef between the two of them, they don't want to draw attention to that particularly, do they? Because that fight that they're referring to got cancelled at 2 days' notice. They're not going to want to allude to that in any way, shape, or form if they can help it, because no one wants history repeating itself in that regard. Ramoni Mode XD says, I think the rehydration for Eubank will be bad. 160 he struggles to make anyway, and a clause on top of that could be KO'd. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to see the kind of records over the years of... DB Cooper 1 just had a go at me. I'll get to that in a minute. Yeah, I'd have to see Eubank's record over the years of how much weight he's added on between weigh-in and fight night. Because if it's usually about 10 pounds or less, it won't make much of a difference, the rehydration clause. And if he's agreed to it, surely he knows that he only adds on around that weight. Because otherwise, you'd be crazy to do that, wouldn't you?
Danny, just on that, I was just looking at the same point, and here's an article from Boxing Scene from Eubank Jr. He says, when I fight at 160, the maximum I put on is £5. And in reference to Kell Brook, he says he will be bigger than me on the night if we fight at 160. So Eubank Jr. is saying that he puts on £5. I would suggest he probably puts on a little bit more than £5. I think he will get to the max of 170.
Yeah. And I think he's got smart people around him. And I think he's been doing this a long time himself. He managed to get down to 159, albeit he looked horrible in the picture. I mean, I look horrible a lot more than that. So what can I say? But in fairness to him, I think he'll be able to do it, and he'll be able to do it professionally. And then it's just about all the other factors that you can weigh up. Because I don't think anyone wants weight to be the deciding factor, albeit it still could be, because Conor Benn's stepping up 2 weight divisions. I know he's fought at 154, but he's really a 147 fighter. DB Cooper 1 says, Flexen sounds like Hearn blaming Eubank. Leave it out, Grandad. I'm not blaming Eubank. I'm saying Eubank knew what he was getting into and still relished the opportunity to fight someone who he later called a cheat and criticised for that whole saga. So I think there is some fault there on Eubank's side. I don't think we should feel too much sympathy for him, considering the attitude he took towards the news that was given to him before the fight. John Wick says, who's Conor Benn's best win? Apart from being disliked and having a famous dad, I can't see why he's a draw. It's a good question. Who is his best win, Ayman? Who are we going to say? Algieri or who more recently? He's had a few kind of ex-challengers, ex-champions, hasn't he?
Maybe Dobson?
Dobson, yeah. Although hasn't Dobson lost again since?
He lost, but he put up a real good fight against Jalil Hackett, who was deemed a big prospect on his way to the top. So maybe Dobson.
Yeah, okay. Ramoni Mode XD says about the only putting on £5, Eubank claims. That is not true at all. He looks very drained of water at 160, that is. He probably puts on a bit more than £10, I'd imagine. I think it's hard to kind of do it via the eye test, isn't it? It'd be good to get some actual clarity on that, but we won't know until the fight itself. And will they even tell us how much weight Eubank's put on? Because it'll be a big talking point, obviously, after the weigh-in. But if they want the fight to go ahead and he's put on, say, £11, are they going to make that public? I wouldn't think so. I think there'd be a lot of behind closed doors negotiations, bit of extra money to the Benn side, and off we go. And it may never get mentioned again. DB Cooper 1, Dr. Flexen to the dying cancer patient on his surgery table. Well, she knew what she was getting into when she came out of the womb. Not exactly the same, is it? I don't think anyone's blessing Chris Eubank Jr. with the innocence of a newborn. John Williams says the rehydration clause is an absolute joke. They should both be fully hydrated. Yeah, I mean, I think if you're deciding to go up 2 weight classes to fight someone at middleweight, you take whatever comes with that. That's the risk you take, isn't it? You know, you don't want to. But then fighters over the years have done this. You know, we've seen Floyd Mayweather Jr. do it. We've seen other fighters do it. You know, and you can't blame them for doing what they can get away with. If it's a negotiating point and you feel like you can get it, then you're doing the best for your fighter by asking for it. Nat says, not at all bothered about Conor Benn versus Eubank Jr., but hoping for a decent undercard. Liam Smith versus Aaron McKenna should be good if it happens, even though Beefy's well past his best, in my opinion. I don't know about well past his best. I mean, certainly past his best, given his best was as a reigning world champion. But yeah, him against Aaron McKenna, given McKenna's struggles in his most recent fight, or the fight before that it might have been, I think it would be a really good showdown. I'd be interested by that. Neil Coop says, if Conor Benn is like his dad, he's bloody frightening. I think he is as well. Thunder Road says, I watched Danny's interview with Kevin Mitchell earlier and learned Tony Cisse has a debilitating motor neurone disease. That is correct, Thunder Road. I saw it on Kevin Mitchell's Facebook a few days ago. The video's up at the moment. The link to the GoFundMe page for Tony Cisse, who grew up on the same council estate as you mentioned earlier, that I did, is on the description of the video and also on our social media pages at the moment. So please do help Tony Cisse if you can. Former ABA champion and someone who's played a vital role in the start of the careers of the likes of O'Hara Davis, Anthony Yard. I mean, don't hold the O'Hara Davis thing against him. Anthony Yard and some other top talents. Real great guy in the boxing community. Absolutely tragic and saddening that this has happened to him. But the boxing community, as it does, will want to rally round and make the best of it. There's a fundraising event on the 15th of March, but you don't have to wait till then. The GoFundMe page is open and accepting donations. Zumbanu Love says, wasn't Eubank left in the dark about Benn's first test? That was before the fight was signed, and he only found out after the fight was cancelled, same as the rest of us. He definitely knew that there was an issue, that there was an adverse finding before, and he was still pushing for the fight to go ahead because he found out when we did and when there was still a chance of the fight happening. Halusi Ozdemir says, don't be surprised if Chris Eubank Jr. comes in over the rehydration clause and he just pays the fine. I mean, if that's what's been agreed, if it is, a certain amount for every pound over, we've seen that before. Zambanu Love, one thing we know for certain is Liam Smith will have had an injury through camp if he loses. That's not very kind, Zambanu Love. DB Coop 1, any truth to the rumours about Sky not wanting to show the fight due to Ben's drug saga and Eubank's links, his manager, Times article? Sounds like BS Matchroom PR job to me. I wouldn't think so. I would think Sky would be falling over themselves given the current state of their boxing performance to have this fight on. Plus, Eubank Jr. has got a partnership agreement with Boxer, so it makes sense that they want it on there. Cuss's System says, I watched the interview as well and have contacted Alex at Matchroom to raise money. That's for Tony Cisse. Jack Dutton on the 45. Have you heard Uncle Turkey might try Canelo versus Crawford for Cinco de Mayo weekend in May? I have, although it seems likely, and we've heard from a couple of our American friends that they may still wait until September. So we shall see. IQ Boxing Academy, Xavier Miller, I am assuming, says this will be a difficult fight to watch for a variety of reasons. Please do expand on that, Zav, if it is indeed you. Stuart O'Keefe, yes, very true. I don't think Chris Jr. cares about the rehydration clause. It would be interesting to know what the penalties are for being overweight, especially if he's already getting more money. I've got a feeling the promoters wish they'd never mentioned the rehydration clause already. I reckon they're not going to want to draw too much attention to it going forward and hope people forget about it by the time the fight comes around. Eubank Jr. versus Benn. We've got to get on to segment 2. So just before we do, Ayman, weeks and weeks, months, in fact, out from the fight. Who would your money be on?
I'll make it as succinct as possible. I think Eubank Jr. will maximise as much as that 170 rehydration clause. Look, there's a rehydration clause in place, but that doesn't mean Eubank Jr. has to meet it. Eubank Jr. might go a couple of pounds over and pay a penalty for it as well. So keep an eye on that, and that will only kind of reveal itself on after the weigh-in and fight night. But it's not a steadfast total rule there. So, and I think keeping that in mind and keeping in mind Conor Benn not being a proper full middleweight, and having seen Benn up close and personal, I feel Benn starts off electric, then fades off around in the 4th and 5th, and heading into whether is this a 10-round fight, 12-round fight. Either way, I fancy Chris Eubank Jr. to come on strong after the halfway mark and win on points against Conor Benn.
Was that really as succinct as possible, Ayman? I'm calling bullshit on that one.
I guess so.
Wow. Yeah, I'll try and be more succinct. It won't be very hard. I will go for Eubank Jr. probably on points. I think Benn gives a really good account of himself. And then after the fight says he knows he's better suited to 147 or even 154, which is what Kell Brook did after he lost to Golovkin. I hope it's not a punishing defeat for Benn in the same way it was for Brook on that night. So, yeah, that's a big fight to look forward to. Another fight that's being talked about a lot at the moment, and Dan Raphael is certainly not among those looking forward to it, is Anthony Joshua against Deontay Wilder. A fight that's been in the talks about for years and years before they suffered their more recent defeats. And now it could be a way back for either or both men. But Dan Raphael said to Ayman last week that he couldn't give a shit about it. So no mincing words there. He brought out the big S word. Did Big Dan. He wasn't happy. He wasn't happy at all. Ayman, do you give a shit?
Yeah, I do give a shit about the fight. I think the perspective shift is different because Deontay Wilder was never this top-level, huge American star that crossed over into the mainstream like Anthony Joshua has in the UK. And, of course, we're a smaller island and the massive America is, and a lot of boxing, Vegas and other places were really kind of the stronghold for boxing, and boxing has missed like a big heavyweight or a real kind of fighter off the back of Floyd Mayweather to really kind of plant the flag for boxing in the USA. But in the UK, Anthony Joshua is big news. He's big bucks, and he's big stadiums, big arena type fights, even if he is at the tail end of his career. That fight should have happened many years ago. You all know this. You've all heard this before. Their promoters have missed their opportunities. It's their fault for it, in my opinion, for not getting that fight off, and us getting it now. Sure, doesn't hold as big of a shit as Dan Raphael mentioned as it once was, but it's still interesting because they're two heavyweights who can bang, and there's that jeopardy in there in the fight because of the power that they carry and the vulnerability that they've shown. Neither fighter has any real momentum as of right now. They've been halted in their last fights, and Zhang huge KO over Wilder, and Dubois with a hellacious KO over Anthony Joshua. One of them can kind of, off of the back of it, off of a big KO, can kind of scream to the rafters that I'm back and ready for a big challenge, and I'm still a big, heavy, concussive puncher, and I'm ready for a big shot. That's what's there for either fighter. I still think it will be an entertaining affair. I think it will be a great build-up between the two, and I would be looking forward to it. But I acknowledge it's just not as big as it was.
He said screaming to the Raffers, and I was going to make a joke, but I could only think of Nadal and Benitez. Any other Raffers? Isn't there a Raff who works for like Fight Hub or one of those channels as well? But I don't know if he's a Raffer.
There's that elusive Raff.
Yeah, gutted. But yeah, I don't give a shit about it, I've got to be honest. I mean, talking of things I don't give a shit about, segment 3 is coming up, and Josh Hart will be joining us soon. Not that I don't give a shit about Josh Hart, I should hasten to add, but I don't give a shit about Misfits. Unfortunately, although I could have been made to give a shit by the fight that was swiftly called off between KSI and Wayne Bridge, as Ayman and I had discussed. But Ayman can fill you in on that conversation in the next segment. Yeah, I mean, I want to see Joshua come back. I think he's still very hungry, got a lot to offer. But do I want to see him against Wilder, who looked absolutely shot in his last 2 fights? I think Wilder got away with the performance before the first of the 2 because people said, well, he was inactive for a long time. It was a bad style match for him against Parker. And, we'll give him another chance. Maybe he still has got something left. And then he confirmed everyone's worst fears in the next one. And I don't see how he can bring that back now. He's got a style that's always relied on having that big equalizer. He's never been a great technical boxer, and he's not going to suddenly become one at this stage of his career. So if he hasn't got that ability to close the distance and the reflexes to get those heavy punches off quickly anymore, then it could be a pretty one-sided fight, because although Joshua got dominated by Daniel Dubois, he doesn't look like a shot fighter. He just looks like a fighter who was taken by surprise by an incredible, young, gifted opponent and wiped out by a huge shot. And that can happen to pretty much any other heavyweight in the division, except perhaps Usyk. And we'll maybe find that out next year when later this year, if they meet again, Dubois and Usyk, that is. But yeah, I think Joshua's got, from the eye test, has got decidedly more left to offer than Wilder. And I think he'd go into that fight with a lot of confidence. I think it will still make money. So if that's what they're looking to do. But I'd rather see AJ come back, against I don't know, who would I like to see him fight? Someone who's still got, a fair amount of ambition. Someone he can rebuild against. And if you want a bit of spice, maybe Jarrell Miller. He's coming off a decent performance. in that draw. And I know we saw him lose to Dubois, but he gave him more rounds than Joshua did, for example. And they've had beef in the past, Joshua and Miller. That's a fight I'd quite like to see, certainly more so than Wilder, or the ghost of Wilder, as it would be. But yeah, that's my view on it. Please give yours in the chat. And just before I take my little hiatus, I'll be back in about 10 minutes after I've dropped my son at kickboxing. Want to remind you that we have got a poll out regarding Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn. What is your reason for watching the fight? Is it their dads? Is it their beef? Is it the fight itself? Or will you just not watch it? Let us know in the poll. We'll read out the results at the end of the show. And talking of Misfits, which I won't be doing, we've now delighted to be joined by Josh Hart. Josh, I do give a shit about you, mate. I wasn't talking about you.
Understood.
Yeah, so don't leave. But yeah, you and Ayman can take over the mantle now. And yeah, let's talk about Bridge, KSI, and everything else from a fun weekend in Manchester.
Yeah, I'll take over the reins here. Danny, looking forward to your return soon. So I was there in Manchester for the latest iteration of the Misfits boxing card. Before I get into that, though, we've had some breaking news just before Seconds Out Live went live. If we can get the statement up. Josh, whilst Vinny is preparing that statement, I'll let you get your vocal cords ready. Read it there. I don't know if you're able to catch it, but go ahead and have a little read of Wayne Bridges' statement as he pulls out from the fight against KSI. Vinny, get it up.
Need it to appear first. That many children look up. Oh, it's disappeared. It's back. My opponent is someone that many children look up to around the world, including my kids. I hope one day he will look back on this differently. I personally don't want to be involved in these exchanges. I will no longer be fighting on 29th of March. I'm still looking out for my next big challenge and have some exciting things coming up in 2025. Thanks for all the love. The support has been overwhelming. I want my friends and family to know how special they are. Deep down, I know this is the right thing to do.
So that was the statement from Wayne Bridge. And just seeing it, we were kind of waiting for information as to who KSI's opponent would be. And we're expecting that pretty soon. The cat sort of like let out the bag moments before fight night, in that it was reported by, I think, Daily Mail and The Sun. A little bit surprised from other reporters in the scene as to it landing on Wayne Bridge, when there was the rumors it could have been someone of Nick Diaz or Luke Rockhold or someone else. But they went with Wayne Bridge, and it seemed to be received, I don't know, maybe not the way it was expected, in that it being Wayne, although Wayne has fought before, I think, in a charity event. He hadn't had any fights since, and at 44, although he has an athletic background playing football for many top clubs and for England as well as their chief left back in his pomp, Wayne was still a surprise choice. And then KSI took to the mic to invite Wayne Bridge into the ring, and then pull out a diss from more than 10 years ago regarding a encounter between Wayne Bridges' then girlfriend or fiance, I think, or maybe even wife it was, and John Terry, which caused him a lot of distress. And there was that famous non-handshake. Josh, I'll bring you in. What was your reaction to seeing KSI calling out Wayne Bridge, the interaction between the two in the ring, and then the subsequent pull-out by Wayne now because of what was said?
Well, obviously, I sat down and watched the whole show on Saturday. So, looking around when KSI said he had an announcement, I'd seen the reports earlier in the day that Wayne Bridge was the front runner, but I kind of didn't want to believe it. I wasn't really sure on whether that was the right fight. I know everyone has their issues with influencer boxing and whatnot, but you want to see these guys at least try test themselves. Okay, yes, it's not about, fighting for world titles or anything, but these are people that are trying to change their life. But KSI always talks about wanting to fight these big names. We've seen him mention, the likes of Conor McGregor. He's mentioned Nate Diaz. He's mentioned Jorge Masvidal. He's mentioned all these names that Darren Till probably went on to mention as well in his quick post-fight interview. And yeah, Wayne Bridge just really wasn't that name that we expected, especially when it's someone who hasn't exactly been in the limelight as of recent either. When you talk about having one of the biggest faces of social media and crossover boxing, you want to see them fight, I should say, people you wouldn't really expect them to see. And Wayne Bridge is one of them, but you want to see them fight the relevant people, not someone who's retired, just getting on with their everyday life now and doing bits here and there. So I wasn't a fan of the Wayne Bridge fight personally. The interaction, I feel like you kind of expected KSI to bring that up. I think it's one of those things that a lot of people expected reading on social media. Again, people said not really shocked by KSI bringing this up with Wayne Bridge. So that's that. And then the pullout, I think it's the right thing. I think whether it is actually because Wayne Bridge isn't happy with the comments, which could very well be the reason and be the legit reason. But again, I wouldn't be shocked if a lot of it is due to the backlash and the reaction the fight has received. And it really wasn't in the positive light in a lot of people's eyes. A lot of the people who follow the crossover boxing scene, not many people were happy with this fight. They said this is a bit of a letdown. KSI said, in 2025, he wants to do things that people are going to watch. And he wants people to be watching him at all times in these big occasions. And I just personally don't believe Wayne Bridge would have been that person to bring the eyes onto it. I'm sure we'll still see KSI go ahead and fight on March 29th. But as to who, I'm not sure. I'd like to see Darren Till. Lee Eaton has already stuck the interest out there and said Darren Till will be ready to fight. I'd say make it happen. Darren Till versus KSI, massive fight. It's a huge fight. So I'd say if you're going to make a fight next for KSI, make that one. There's plenty around it now. We know what Darren Till's about. Let's get it on.
Yeah, and I will. Josh, did you see much of the Misfits boxing card as well too?
Yeah, I watched the whole card. I watched all of it.
Okay, I'll get to your thoughts in a second. Let me just jump to the chat here. We have Philip Price and where's Radio Raheem? I'm sure we'll have an interview with Radio Raheem soon. You have to wait for that though, Philip. Ben looks different too since he's come back, less explosive, less impact, says Reggie Zaza. Romani Mode XD says book Wayne versus Terry instead. I thought that might be the route that they would try to go, or maybe involve John Terry in, but I imagine John Terry would command a significant fee to be involved. My kind of Misfits and the back and forths and the fare that you would expect from some of the interactions. KSI coming out with the John Terry lines. Look, I didn't hate it by any means. It was a bit of a low blow, but it was expected. It was more just a case that it was 10 years old. Could you not come up with something a little bit more recent? But he went there nonetheless. Ice Lolly says Ben has somehow managed to weather the onslaught from the public and got back onto the scene. The fact that you're covering KSI shows how weak the boxing scene is over there. Can't deny that it does do numbers. That's the truth, Philip. Danny is back in the hot seat. Won't bring him back in just yet. I'll jump back to Josh, who did watch the Misfits card. I'll get to my thoughts in a moment, Josh. But what did you think of watching this latest iteration of the Misfits boxing?
I actually thought it was quite an entertaining card. There was a lot of fights on there that I was quite interested in, just for different reasons. Obviously, I've grown up in a different era where a lot of these people fighting on Misfits, I have kind of grew up watching. I think the fight that really stood out for me was Little T versus Afghan Dan. For those people who know the background and the background of BG Media, that is something that I probably knew more about than what I did boxing when I was younger. I was big on all of that. It was massive for people my age, and when I was growing up at school, people always talking about that. And seeing them reignite these beefs, it was really, really interesting to see. I know, like I said before, everyone has their opinions and what they think of it, but I think what you've got to remember with influencer boxing is these guys know they're not the best. It's just bringing more eyes to the sport and seeing some of the other fights on it, and I like what Misfits do now with the introduction of Ty Mitchell. He looks very good against Tommy Hench, who's, again, people who follow the unlicensed scene. Tommy Hench is a very active unlicensed fighter. Great performance from Ty Mitchell. Seeing Wade Plemons fight, Ayman, I watched a lot of your content with Wade last week. I thought there was some really good interviews with him, especially the one post-fight that you got. From him to go from commentator to fighter, for me, he was my fighter of the night outside the main event. I was really impressed with someone having their first boxing match and seeing how calm and composed he was, and he looked very good for the influencer level. I was very, very impressed. The main event, first of all, I think the first thing we should be saying here is I'm just glad to hear that Anthony Taylor's okay. We all heard about what happened post-fight, him collapsing, so very happy to hear that he is okay and that he is safe and all healthy. But Darren Till showed the levels in there, in my opinion. I think Darren Till looked very good. Looked absolutely massive compared to Anthony Taylor, which we kind of expected, but in the ring looked even bigger than what he had done before. And sets himself up for some really good opportunities now in Misfits. There's a lot going on. We've seen just how big these events can be. It looked very busy in the arena and packed out on fight night on Saturday. Obviously, Ayman can have a better grasp for that than I can. I was watching it from my bedroom. Ayman was in the arena. Probably easier to tell. But yeah, again, I thought a really entertaining event. I think personally, I'm all for Misfits. I really like it. I think I like what they're doing. And it's changing a lot of these influencers' lives. So a lot of them spend a lot of their life maybe just behind a screen, sat at a desk. Kind of sounds like my life on a day-to-day basis. But hey-ho. At the end of the day, Misfits, they're doing well. They've created some really good events. And yeah, hopefully I can get on there one day. If Misfits are seeing this, throw me in there with anyone.
You want to box on Misfits?
Yeah, I'd happily box on Misfits if the opportunity arose.
We should do like student versus mentor, Danny versus Josh, because there's a couple of videos of Danny throwing a few jabs and right hands, and look like tough competition for you, Josh. I think bring Danny back in after this. I would just like to add being there as
I'm ready to call people out if you want. I'll start calling people out right here, right now.
I think we'll leave those call outs for another day. But yeah, at the Co-op Live, it looked like for what they had there, obviously by no means was it a capacity, and you wouldn't expect that after the back of Tommy Fury pulling out of the main event. That would have been a real huge event, but they still did very well to feel like I'm not a great gauge on the eye of how many thousands of people are in there, but it was packed in there, and they turned up from the first bell as well too, so they very much enjoyed this latest iteration of the Misfits boxing. And what surprised me really also was, going to name some names here, Johnny Nelson was there, Liam Smith was there, Natasha Jonas was there, Anthony Fowler was there. I'm sure there were a number of other fighters. Prince Nassim, of course, to support his sons was there, but I'm sure there was a number of fighters that I didn't cross paths with on the night that were there too. And Liam said as well, look, I don't hate this scene. I really wanted to go see Afghan Dan versus Little T. I enjoy it, but let it just be this version of white collar boxing, and that's it, and we're the professional fighters. And I can totally understand and accept that, but it seems to be getting more interest from the traditional boxing scene and some of the key figures in the scene as well. But yeah, no, I thought AT showed warrior spirit. Darren Till showed that he was levels above. Little T and Afghan Dan probably was the poorest quality fighting ever on Misfits, but it was entertaining. It was pure entertainment, and you can't really knock two people wanting to get in the ring and settle the beef. Get paid, I guess, but settle it. Sami Hamed, look, who was overmatched against that Ziggy Johnson, wasn't a real good affair, and I think Sami Hamed is very much due a step up pretty quickly. Same sort of thing with Ty Mitchell. Sure, he's been out of the ring for quite a while, but Ty Mitchell is a pro boxer, pro fighter, so I want to see him against pros, and a fight against Idris Virgo is a step in the right direction. I don't mind that too much when it's a pro versus pro in that scene, but a pro versus influencer, sometimes it can leave a little bit more wanting in the matchmaking. But otherwise, yeah, KSI, we'll see who the next opponent is, but it's not Wayne Bridge for now. And let me bring back in Danny as well, unless he wants to comment on the Wayne Bridge situation for the final topic.
Hey guys, yeah, Wayne Bridge, decent player in his day. No John Terry, in fairness. That's the only area I want to compare him on, is their football performances. Everything been all right while I've been gone? Headlines all been fine? Nothing of that nature?
I won't dub Vinny in too much, but Vinny's back on it now, that's for sure.
Good. Glad to hear it. Has Josh's number one fan turned up, or was his appearance too late? No?
Not turned up. No turn up.
Oh, wow.
I've had conversations. I've let them know. They'll be on their best behaviour in future if they ever join again.
If they ever join again. Is this your way of saying you've murdered her? She's under your patio.
I'm not going to comment at this time.
No, probably best not to.
Josh mentioned that he wants to get on Misfits. Would you take up a student versus mentor fight, Danny?
I'd have to see him in action first. I haven't watched his white collar fight all the way through yet, so I need to. I need to do
it's only
my
5 minutes long. It's not even that long to watch, and it's great action. It's a fight of the year contender.
Josh won't have had his. Josh doesn't have his man strength, and Danny, you've got your old man strength, so that would be the battle.
Josh doesn't have his man strength, and I never had mine. it'd be a good battle. No, I think I'd like to see Josh Hart against Lewis Hart, battle for hearts and minds.
No, that's my long lost brother, so I can't do that. That's family matters. That's taking.
He could be your permanent lost brother if it goes your way.
I think I'll slide on that fight. I've got my names in mind. If Bevo's watching this, I'll see you soon.
Ooh, yes, we've got a call out. It's about time we had a call out on SO Live. I thought it'd be one of the pro boxers, maybe, but
I'm trying to get the slim pickings just so I can keep winning. I just want to fight the easy guys.
You call him Bevo slim pickings? Jeez, Josh.
Easy money.
Wow.
Bevo is easy money. He's had 2 fights scheduled and I'm pulled out of both, and he wouldn't pull out of a fight against me because he's the A side. I'll go in the away corner.
I don't think he knows you, Josh.
Hey, well, listen, this is the start, though. This is the start of getting me known by him.
Well, it sounds to me like Josh Hart's getting personal, and he's not been the only one in the boxing scene recently. Love that segue. Tank Davis has got personal. Not it's not enough that Terence Crawford's trying to go up 2 weight classes, 3 weight classes, 2 weight classes, 2 now, isn't it? Because he's a super welter. 2 weight classes to fight Canelo. But Tank seems to want to start beef with someone who's, I don't know how many weight classes above 3. Where's Tank at the moment? Lightweight. Yeah, Ayman's nodding. He's muted, but I'm looking at his facial expressions. He is nodding. So, yeah, 3 weight classes above. I don't think they're ever actually going to fight in the ring anyway. But for some reason, they've started this beef about who's got more money and who draws more fans. And then Tank started talking about Crawford's family. And I don't know what to make of it all. Josh, I was going to say because you're a younger man, but Terence Crawford's almost the same age as me. Well, what do you make of all of it? Why are they getting personal when there's not even a fight to sell?
It's just how boxing works sometimes, I suppose. Sometimes fighters just disagree on things. I'm not really sure, to be honest. Tank baffles me. I think Tank's one of those fighters that you just never really quite know what's going on. One time he's coming out with saying he's retired. Next minute he wants to fight someone else. It's becoming too much to follow with Tank. We know he's got a fight date now, but I don't know what his problem is with Terence Crawford. I thought Terence Crawford seems like an all right bloke, to be honest. So, well, it's one of those. It just stems out of nothing, and then it just leaves, well, me in this case, scratching my head as to why this has happened. There's no fight to sell. If we're going to settle it, let's just have a quick spar. Have a spar away from the cameras. Leave it there. They don't need to just get personal on social media. That's the last thing you want to do, especially when there's no fight to sell.
Josh, tomorrow when you're doing the clip outs for this episode of the Live, can you make sure at least one of them's headlined, Terence Crawford seems like quite a decent bloke?
I can give that a go if you want. I don't know how many views that's going to do, but...
Little picture of you in the corner, SO Live endorses Crawford as good bloke.
Yeah, listen, we can do that. I'm sorry, I'm not really too sure on this section. I've not seen an awful lot on this.
Ayman, do you want to even it up? What's your opinion on Tank Davis? Nice fella?
Yes, class, both 2 classy individuals. No, look, I think Josh mentioned that there isn't a fight to sell. There is a fight to sell. What does Tank usually do when he's got a fight to sell? Is he falls out with someone. I know we're 2 months away from his fight with Lamont Roach, but the usual Tank ace up the sleeve, Joker in the pack is to fall out with someone, and usually it's Floyd Mayweather. I think they've played that card too much, although they probably play it closer towards Tank Davis, but and Lamont Roach. But he's seen an easy shot to. I mean, Terence Crawford did bring it on, but easy interaction, easy fallout, easy way to garner some interest between another pound for pound level fighter. It's never going to materialize in a fight, as Dan Raphael mentioned as well in the interview I did with him, and I feel the same way. I think Tank's pound for pound battle will be against Inoue if a pound for pound battle does materialize with him in the near future, maybe even Devin Haney as well, Shakur Stevenson. But that's the one that looks most closest on the horizon. But this one was just a case, I think, for him to just get a little bit of interaction. I don't think he's particularly too bothered right now off the back of no real movement in terms of getting something over the line with Riyadh season. I think Tank just wants to drum up some interest and conversation, and maybe in the future it might lead to a Ring Magazine Awards invite. But whether Tank's interested in that right now, whether Turki Al-Sheikh is interested in right now, with a lot of fighters and a lot of fights to get over the line, we've seen that extensive list of names, which didn't feature, of course, Tank Davis on there for fights to make. Tank finds himself outside, whether it's by choosing voluntarily or involuntarily. Seems to be outside of that scene right now, and he's keeping his name in people's mouths. I don't think he's too bothered about the money that Crawford is making. I'm not too bothered about who's making more out of the two of them, or a fight between the two of them, but I would like to see big fights in the future. One of them might be Canelo for Crawford, and one of them might be Inoue or another Devin Haney, Garcia, whatever it is for Tank. And he quoted 250 million, didn't he, for that Ryan Garcia rematch? I know one person that would come close to that figure, although it wouldn't be that figure, and it's probably the only person that would come close to getting that figure. If he wants that money, then I think we'll have to get closer to a Ring Magazine Awards invite than he is right now.
Thunder Road is telling Josh to call out Joe Pugh of IFL fame, and DB Cooper 1 suggests Charlie Parsons. Fancy that smoke, Josh, either of those?
Both good friends, both get along with them quite well. But, you know, if the money's right, I'll entertain some conversations, just trying to chase the bag personally.
So
are they decent blokes?
They both seem like quite decent guys.
We both went for it.
Yeah, sorry, Ayman.
Yeah, is that a quote going down in the Hall of Fame? Terence Crawford is an all right bloke.
I don't know. I wasn't alive when you said it.
Oh, come on now. That. Listen.
Oh,
sorry, Josh, but I'd back both Charlie and Joe Pugh to beat you.
Brutal infighting.
Ayman, I thought we were friends. Ayman.
I'm a decent bloke, not quite a friend.
Yeah, very good. VKNN Few LSB, who I don't want to keep saying that over and over, one of my bigger supporters on YouTube, has now migrated over to the live chat, so thanks for joining us. He says, here is Flexen, and then Flexen versus Edwards. Fucking hell, I hope he means Perry Edwards. Flexen by first round knockout. Too big, too strong, too charismatic. I'm not sure how much my undoubted charisma will help me avoid those big shots from the Girls Aloud singer. Nat says, I'm head of the Flexen fan club and currently the only member. Let me know if you want to join. And I think VKNN Few LSB, that's not an easy one, has agreed. So we're now 2 strong in the fan club. Philip Fry said, Tank's made a powerful enemy today. Everyone knows he's not moving past 140. Porter says, Eubank and Benn have about as much beef between them as a vegan. I see what you did there. What is this? My dad didn't like your dad. The fight is good as it is. I'll be watching. Well, there you go. So you know how to vote in our poll then, Porter. It's the fight. You just like the good fight. It's nothing to do with their beef. It's nothing to do with their dad. It's just the fight. Philip Fry. Oh, Philip, you don't need to keep your caps lock on for every chat. Just a little word there. Says Tank is a Canelo fan, and that's where his loyalty is. Tank's also been close to Errol Spence. Sorry, the live chat's just scrolled down a bit too fast. Even the live chat's too fast for me, so I don't want to be getting in with any Edwards. Reggie Zaza says, lol, you guys, it's okay. There are 2 Americans here in the chat. Bud is the king, says Philip Fry. Reggie says, Tank is upset about the promotional issues. We have a PBC versus the world issue in America. Sounds like a really bad Marvel movie. DB Cooper says, weirdly, I believe Tank when he says he wants to retire. The guy has a lot of personal/mental issues he can only fix in retirement with therapy. Brutal childhood. Reggie goes on, PBC and Al Heyman don't want to work for Saudi Arabia. Not a fight to be made. It's a political boxing issue. Please read up on this, guys. Javante wants to stay American based. He said he refuses to go to Turkey. Yeah, I'm aware of the beef, or if you want to call it that, between Javante and Turkey and Riyadh season. I'm not sure why Crawford's taking strays. P. Macca says never knew Foden is a boxing fan. Reggie said he doesn't see the necessary need to work with anyone on the other side of the street, meaning Tank. Philip Fry says everyone doesn't fancy boxing being run by one entity in the States, and that's where their problems stem from, either you're with the new regime or standing firm with the current situation. Reggie agrees with Philip. How not to play says cannot wait for Turkey to step in and get these boxing channels fighting each other. Mate, if Turkey wants to start offering the sort of money he offers to real fighters to the boxing channels, I'll fight literally anyone. There's not much I wouldn't do for money. If that means getting knocked out in a few seconds and earning a career best payday, which won't be hard, then yeah, I'm all up for it. Let him know. Reggie goes on to say it's PBC versus the world. Yeah, I mean, what I wanted to ask you guys, less so about Tank fighting Crawford and what their motivations are, but just trash talking boxing in general, whether it's face-to-face or whether it's across social media. When you go into boxing, do you kind of have a tacit acceptance that there's nothing off limits and you can say anything you want to your opponent? We've seen guys have brawls at press conferences in the past, say the most heinous things about each other and their families. Is it a case of anything goes, or did Tank cross a line? Are the tenor of his comments going too far? Ayman, you first of all, what do you think?
Yeah, in my career of covering boxing, which hasn't been long, but watching boxing, I don't particularly like talk of, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that to you, because if something terrible was to happen on the back end of it and you've made those comments, then, you know, there's really no way from coming back from that situation. I didn't like the Misfits boxing situation where a sausage was thrown at a gentleman who was Muslim, and it turned out to be a turkey sausage, but that wasn't the point. And as far as I'm aware, behind the scenes, they got them in a lot of hot water, and nothing of that ilk has been seen since, which is good. I get that you can have other kind of crazy sort of affairs and things and flare-ups and such. That's all accepted. That's all fine. But I just think, even like I mentioned with the KSI Wayne Bridge thing, you know that KSI is going to go there. It's the thing to go with Wayne Bridge. It's just more that it's like 10 years ago. Like, it's just, you know, really, that's kind of the feeling there. But anything that is, there was absolutely an element of mind games and warfare in boxing and in sport in general. That's why goalkeepers jump on the spot and wave their hands, and Bruce Grobbelaar was acting drunk when he was saving penalties. Those sort of things.
Explain to Mr. Hart who Bruce Grobbelaar is.
Former Liverpool goalkeeper Bruce Grobbelaar. Check him out. You'll see exactly what I mean. And goalkeepers since have copied that, because they're trying to get into their mind before that kick, because if you can put your opponent off in any sort of way, then that might maximize into a missed penalty or a missed opportunity or a big shot to knock out your opponent. That's what it's all about. Most famously and recently, one of the best mind games played for me was George Kambosos against Teofimo Lopez. He just wound him up, wound him out. And for this a skill versus skill level, Teofimo Lopez is another level to George Kambosos, but he wiped away that skill disparity by getting in his head and making him go for the knockout from the off. And Teofimo Lopez could not get out of that mode of just charging forward, not getting behind his boxing. And that led for a brilliant knockdown and a brilliant night in boxing where George Kambosos capitalized upon that. George Kambosos didn't quite go to the levels of saying he was going to kill him and this, that, from what I can remember, or anything like that. But you just wound him up. I think that sort of thing is, you've got to do that in sport and in boxing. But anything above that, anything about killing, when Wilder said he wants a body on his record, it's stupid and it's silly. And the thing is, like, you know that these people, they don't mean it like that, but they just have to kind of say it, I guess, to get themselves into that mind frame. And it's a bit of a grey sort of area, like a weird line to walk. But that sort of thing I'm not too much of a fan of. But everything else, I think, is the door's open for it.
Is there an essence, Josh, I'll ask you, that it could be a bit of a generational thing? You know, do we see it more with the rise of things like Misfits and influence of boxing and stuff, in that there is a lot more emphasis on personality and trash talk and, you know, insulting your opponent and ribbing each other as a build-up to, even if they're not going to fight, you know, just that whole environment. Is that what's been created? Like, Josh, you're obviously a bit younger than Ayman and I, a lot younger than me. Do you see it as more acceptable? Were you surprised by it?
I think there's like lines, isn't there? You know, there's some things you can get away with saying, but like Eamon said, when you start going into mentioning, I'm going to kill you, or, you know, like obviously again mentioning Wilder wanted a body on his record, that's where it is crossing the line. I don't think age matters onto the thought of that. You know, when you're threatening with life and stuff, that's a completely different game. That's when it's a bit bang out of order. But I think the sad part is with boxing nowadays is you kind of need to have a bit of personality, a bit of trash talk about you sometimes if you want to sell. I think what we're seeing a lot more nowadays is fighters not only getting signed because of fantastic ability, but whether that's down to how many tickets they sell, or more importantly now, social media presence and how big social media is to grow a fighter. I think fighters who've capitalised on social media perfectly, someone like Johnny Fisher, while it's not necessarily him who's capitalised on the social media, having Big John there, his dad on there, that's done wonders for him. You've got Big John going on tours in Hong Kong and Sydney this week, and no one even knows what he does on these tours, but he's getting paid to do it, and it's been really beneficial for Johnny's career as well, and that's all just stemmed from a local community. And sometimes it's just about being a decent bloke. I think one thing that's very overlooked is just going on there and being yourself. Because sometimes, like Johnny Fisher's done that, he's gone on there and sold really well. And I've never seen him say anything horrible about anyone. He just gets in there, has a fight, has a Chinese afterwards, and that's turned him into a bit of a star, I guess you could say. But back onto the trash talk. Again, like I said, I'd say it is kind of needed now. I'd say it is something that you need to see, and especially with the influence of social media nowadays. Obviously, I've grown up in this social media area, so I can't really talk about the past and how fights were sold back in the day, because for me now, fights tend to be sold at press conferences and then back and forth and get conversations on social media. That's how I've tend to see fights get sold nowadays, and you can't deny that it works, and seeing the trash talk through social media and at press conferences and whatnot. But there's just levels, and it depends on how far you want to take it and how personal you want to make it. And again, even when you take it personal, there's only so far you can go until you are genuinely probably being looked at by the boxing community as a bit of an arsehole. So it's a very interesting one, and there's a very thin line that you need to balance on. Although if you go one way, you're probably being too nice. If you go in the other way, you're being a bit too hard. So it's just finding that line, and I guess you can capitalise on it perfectly, where you can still maintain that respect, sell the fight, and ultimately grow your own career. So that's what I'd say.
Chris Eubank Sr. That's what he did. He maintained that line and he created a character. The talent kind of matched the wackiness of the character as well too. And he wasn't really an effer and jeffer, was he? But you don't get many characters like Chris Eubank Sr. anymore. Danny, like, what is the closest we've had to Chris Eubank Sr.? It's one of a kind, and I think fighters often sell themselves short because they never build the character side of them to match the talent side of them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Tyson Fury maybe would be these days the closest. I mean, he's retired now, isn't he? But, he's someone who's kind of always gone to his own tune. There's a certain amount of, I don't know what the word is, creating a bit of a facade as well. It's not just him talking off the cuff all the time. He created a bit of a persona. So there's him. There's a few others at the lower levels. But, yeah, I agree with you. It's kind of lost art. And I think boxers in the past maybe needed to do that more because boxing was more of a mainstream sport on terrestrial television. So having that extra thing about you, whether it was the arrogance of a Eubank or a Nassim Hamed, or the, cross-cultural divide bridging of a Barry McGuigan, you needed that extra element to you. And that was back in the days when boxers used to get on the shortlist for Sports Personality of the Year a lot more often. So, yeah, it's a different world now. But, I didn't like the direction Tank took it in. If you need, any extra reason not to bring someone's partner's weight into an argument, look at what happened in The Sopranos with Ginny Sack and Ralph and Johnny Sack, wanting revenge. It never ends well for the person who goes low first. Just saying. Reggie Zaza says, I like talking junk about maybe appearances and character. Yeah, I mean, I think if you're doing that to the person you're actually in the argument with, that's fine. But bringing their family into it, for me, does cross a line. VK-MFU-LSB says, credit to Flexen, who, despite his good relations with Warren, he's been blanking me all day, I should point this out, gave his honest opinion on the Fury so-called retirement. Flexen could have went with he's retired, but instead openly speculated. Yeah, I mean, I think you lose all credibility, don't you, if you just kind of accept everything someone tells you at face value. DB Cooper 1 says, I don't think Saudi boxing lasts long, to be honest. The Saudis love WWE. Who wouldn't? Football and UFC over boxing. Boxing is just Turkey's passion project. I don't mind. Enjoy the fun power and influence in the establishment, I think boxing will be in a good place. I don't think that's an issue. I think it is a passion project for him. I don't doubt that. But I don't see any signs of him going anywhere anytime soon. So maybe that's not such a bad thing. You know, Tony Khan, AEW is a passion project for Tony Khan, but as long as he stays rich and powerful, there's not a real issue with that. He's a young man. Reggie also says, but the gimmick boxing isn't fun. It's dookie. Maybe the first ever mention of dookie on Seconds Out Live. VKWN Few LSB says, is that a bottle of Old Spice on Josh Hart's cabinet or are my eyes worse for wear? Josh, is it Old Spice?
What's he looking at?
You don't need to offer him out.
No, like, what
are you looking at? What are you looking at?
No, I've just got, what have I got? I've got some spot cream, some aftershave, some hair powder.
No Old Spice.
No, that side.
Do you know what Old Spice is?
No.
Brilliant. Reggie says, I don't agree. They have invested far more into boxing. He's talking about the Saudi regime. They even have long-term projects tied to the WBC. You're nuts to think it's temporary. Jack Dutton on the 45 says, when are Queensbury actually moving over to the zone? I like to end with an easy answer. April this year. So glad we sorted that out. Just before we do let you go, though, we all say our goodbyes. We do need a result of our poll. We asked you why, and if indeed you will, watch Eubank Jr. versus Benn. And if you do, for what reason will it be? And we've had 46% say their reason for watching Eubank Jr. against Conor Benn is their famous fathers, Nigel Benn and Chris Eubank Sr. 20% say it's the fight itself. 19%, not even in last place, say they won't be watching at all. And only 14% say the beef between the two younger fighters. So, yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if that's because we skew a bit older in our audience on SO Live. Please do, if you're watching this on playback, please do let us know your thoughts on Eubank Jr. versus Benn and indeed anything else we've discussed in this episode. We do respond to a lot of the comments. It's not just in the live chat that we answer back to you guys. Do give us a like, a thumbs up if you haven't already, and subscribe to the channel if you're not already a subscriber. We love doing this every week, but it would be nothing without the fans because we are the most interactive show. That's the key word, interactive show on Boxing YouTube. And we couldn't be that without the interaction, obviously, from the fans. Serious question, Josh Reader haircut, says DB Cooper 1. I know it's a trend now to only cut the sides. Do people do that themselves or still pay barbers full price for a third of the job? And anything to say on that, Josh?
Well, I've not had a haircut in about 2 weeks now, so I'm kind of waiting to go get my next one. But I guess you could say I'll still go pay my barber to do it. You know, it's the style nowadays. I'm down with the kids, I guess you could say.
You are a kid.
Hey, I'm an adult now. I'm nearly 19, Daniel, have you know, so I'm definitely in adult territory now. So, yeah, right. I don't really know what else to say about the haircut. Let me cook. I'm growing it back out now, so it won't look like this much longer.
Reggie says, I loved your stream, bro. This was dope. Dope and dookie. We're so cool. I love it. Ramoni Word XD saying goodbye. Guys, really appreciate you all tuning in. But as is always the case, the final closing remarks go to Mr. Ayman Khan.
He says, Reggie says he's speaking on the Old Spice guy. I don't know who that is. Must be one. It's one of us two, Danny.
No, it's Josh. Because he thought Josh had Old Spice on his shelf.
God knows. Anyway, what I do know, though, is this. Yeah, another great edition of Seconds Out Live. Wouldn't be anything like Danny's mentioned without your contributions in the chat. So thank you so much for that. Thank you to everyone who's clicked the like button as well and subscribed as well too. Wouldn't be here without your support either. Myself personally, I will be here on Seconds Out Live covering as much of the boxing content as I can, and looking forward to a Jim Lampley interview hopefully in the next hour or so, dropping on Seconds Out after as well once I've got that sorted, and in the field tomorrow covering the Royal Albert Hall card, which sees Jonas versus Lauren Price press conference launch. Josh Hart is in Nottingham covering Dalton Smith, going for the European title against, I believe the fella's name is pronounced Weezer or Queezer. But Dalton Smith back out in action. And potentially as well a big press conference towards the later end of the week as well. KSI looking for that opponent now, not being Wayne Bridge. Might have more information on that. But for any and all of the latest breaking developments and news, please do keep tuned to Seconds Out Live. But for now, thank you from myself. Thank you from Danny Flexen and Joshua and Vinny behind the scenes too. We'll see you guys next week.